I always thought I knew my son well enough. After all, I'd raised him alone for most of his life since Robert, my husband, died in a car accident when Webster was only 11. Now, sitting in my quiet apartment and going through old photographs, I realize how wrong I was. I'm 75 and I've spent most of my life working as a financial advisor for First Merchant Bank of Tuscaloosa. Not the most glamorous job, but it has given me two things: a steady income and an understanding of how money works. I've seen people with six-figure salaries go broke because of stupid decisions, and I've seen humble employees amass a decent fortune through discipline and patience. My apartment is not luxurious, but it's not squalid either. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room overlooking the park. The walls are decorated with watercolors by local artists and framed photos. My Robert in an engineering helmet, little Webster on his bike, me in my graduation gown while getting my finance degree. These are all testimonies to a life that was challenging, but definitely worthwhile. When Robert died, he left us a life insurance policy. Not huge, but enough that I could afford to be out of work for a year and finish my education. I invested most of it in high-risk bonds and index funds, nothing risky, but with steady gains. Added to that was the insurance on the house, which was paid in full the year before he died. I sold it 5 years after the tragedy, when the real estate market took off, and invested wisely. When Webster announced he was going to marry Pearl, I doubled my work hours to help them with the down payment on the house. A small but decent house in the Forest Lake neighborhood. I remember the pride on my son's face when he got the keys. It was worth it. Daisy, their daughter, was born 2 years after the wedding. She was a ray of sunshine to me, smart, inquisitive, with a genuine smile so reminiscent of her grandfather's. I tried to be there for her, but not to impose. I came when called, helped when asked. Daisy spent weekends with me when she was little. I read books to her, taught her how to bake blueberry muffins, and talked about the constellations we viewed from the little balcony. Webster grew up ambitious. He did well in high school, well in college, but I always felt he lacked something. Compassion, maybe? He was always focused on material goals, a new car, a promotion, a more upscale neighborhood. Perla was perfect for him, just as driven, with flawless makeup and a cold smile. I never told my son what I thought of his choice. After all, it was his life. She worked at the elegant home furniture store, selling luxury sofas and beds to people who often couldn't afford them. She had a talent for convincing people they needed more than they thought they did. When I retired a year ago, my financial situation was stable. A good pension from the bank, Social Security, investments I had carefully built up over the years, and an inheritance left by Robert's sister, who passed away childless. I never thought I'd be so secure in my old age, and it got me thinking, why do I need all this money? What am I going to do with it? Travel? My knees aren't what they used to be. Buy expensive things? I like my old furniture. Every single thing in my house has a story and meaning. That's when the thought of a home for the Websters came to mind. Their modest home in Forest Lake had become cramped. Daisy had grown up and needed more space. Plus, the neighborhood was slowly falling into disrepair. Not a place I wanted my teenage granddaughter. I didn't share my plans with anyone, not even my longtime friend Evelyn, with whom we usually discussed everything. The decision seemed too personal, too significant to discuss with anyone but myself. I started by researching the Tuscaloosa real estate market. The Highland Park neighborhood was too expensive even for my options. Northport seemed like a good option. Upscale neighborhoods, good schools, proximity to downtown. I took notes, studied the classifieds, even went scouting on weekends, looking at streets where my son and his family could live. One morning I called the office of Marla Kincaid, the realtor Evelyn had recommended to me. She's honest, my friend said. She won't sell you a house with a rotten foundation like some people. Good morning, Premier Real Estate, came the cheerful voice on the phone. Hi, can I speak to Marla Kincaid, please? That's her. How can I help you? I explained that I was looking for a house for my son and his family, gave an approximate budget and preferred neighborhoods. How exciting! She sounded genuinely surprised. It's not every day that parents buy houses for their grown children. That's very generous of you, Mrs. Quimby. We arranged to meet the next day at her office. I wore my best pantsuit, the dark blue one I'd once worn to important client meetings. I wanted to give the impression of a serious customer. Marla turned out to be an energetic woman in her 40s, with bright red hair and a dazzling smile. Her office was littered with pictures of happy families in front of their homes, apparently satisfied customers. So, Mrs. Quimby, she opened her laptop. Let's be specific about exactly what you're looking for. We spent the next hour discussing the details. The size of the house, the number of bedrooms, the specifics of the layout, the age of the house, the distance to Daisy's school. I didn't want the house to be too old, less chance of hidden problems. But I wasn't attracted to new builds either. They're often hastily built, with little money spent on materials. I want it to be a house they can live in for years to come, I explained. Not just a nice box, but a place where my granddaughter would grow up and remember it fondly. Marla nodded, making notes. I see. The quality of the construction, the nice neighborhood, the prospects for the future. She looked up from the screen. And another important question. Does your son know about your plans? I shook my head. No. I wanted to surprise him. In fact, I just didn't want Webster and Perla to influence my choice of house. Knowing them, they'd start demanding more than I could afford. Marla looked puzzled. I usually recommend that prospective tenants be involved in the selection. It's their place to live, after all. I understand, I nodded. But first, I want to find a few good options. Then we'll go together. She agreed, though I could see that she didn't like the idea. Maybe she was just afraid of losing the commission if her son didn't like my choice. The next weekend, Marla showed me 3 houses. The first was too dark. The tall trees around it blocked out the sunlight. The second was on a busy street. I imagined Daisy crossing that road and my heart sank with fear. The third was almost perfect, spacious, bright, with a beautiful backyard. But as we looked around the basement, I noticed damp spots on the walls. Is that normal? I asked Marla. She pursed her lips. Let's just say it's not critical, but it's not perfect. Maybe there's a problem with the drainage system. I shook my head. I didn't want my son to be faced with repairs right after we moved in. The next week we toured 5 more houses. One of them, on Magnolia Drive, looked promising to me. It was a classic 2-story house with columns, a spacious kitchen, and a good layout. The backyard wasn't very big, but it was well maintained with a patio and barbecue area. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office for Webster, and a playroom that Daisy could turn into a creative studio. What do you think? Marla asked as we stood in the driveway admiring the facade. I like it, I admitted. But I'd like to know more about the foundation, the roof, the systems of the house. Of course, we'll have a full inspection before we buy. I always insist on it. In the evening, I sat over my financial spreadsheets for a long time. The house on Magnolia Drive was at the top end of my budget. If I bought it, I'd have to rethink my retirement plans. Less traveling, more saving for everyday expenses. But wasn't that what I'd been saving for all these years? To give my family a better life? The next day, I called Webster and invited him to lunch at the Southern Table. Not a bad restaurant with decent food and not too much noise. What's the matter, Mom? He asked as soon as we sat down at the table. You sounded mysterious on the phone. Do I need an excuse to have lunch with my son? I smiled, but immediately decided not to pull the cat by the tail. Webster, I want to do something for you and your family. What is it? He's tense, always protective of his independence, even when he accepted my help. I want to buy you a house. A new house. Bigger and in a better neighborhood. He stared at me like I'd just announced I was going to go to the moon. A house? His voice dropped to a whisper. Are you serious? Absolutely. I've already started looking. There's one on Magnolia Drive that seems perfect. 4 bedrooms, nice yard. Wait, he held up his hands. It's too much, Mom. We can't accept such a gift. But his eyes said otherwise. They glowed with greedy curiosity. You can and you will, I said firmly. I want to do it, Webster. I want to see you live in a nice house, in a safe neighborhood. I want Daisy to have her own room where she can do her projects. I want Perla to be able to have visitors without being cramped. But your money, your pension? I've done the math, I assured him. I'll have enough to live comfortably. He shook his head, but I could see that the resistance was purely symbolic. I'll have to discuss it with Perla. Of course, I nodded. In fact, I'd like you both to come with me to see the house on Magnolia Drive. Maybe this weekend? He agreed, and we moved on to other topics. But I noticed how periodically his gaze became absent. He was already envisioning himself as the owner of a new home. Saturday, we met Marla at the house on Magnolia Drive. Perla couldn't hide her excitement as soon as we pulled up. My goodness, Webster, look at those columns and that lawn. She squeezed his hand. This is a whole other level. We walked slowly around the house. Perla oohed and awed over the granite countertops in the kitchen and the jacuzzi tub in the master bath. Webster nodded approvingly as he surveyed the spacious 2-car garage and the first-floor study. What do you think? I asked when we had finished looking around and were standing in the backyard. It's amazing, Winnie, Perla breathed out, calling me by my diminutive name for the first time in years. It's unbelievable. Webster was more subdued, but I could see his eyes sparkling. Seriously, Mom, that's too generous. We don't deserve this. Yes, you do, I countered. You're my family. Who else would I leave my money to? On the way home, they made plans. What furniture to take from the old house, what to buy new, how to organize the rooms. I listened to them with a smile. It had been a long time since I had seen my son so lively. To my surprise, however, Webster called the next day to say that he and Perla would like to look at a few more houses for comparison. The house on Magnolia Drive is gorgeous, he said. But since you're making such a generous gift, we want to be sure it's exactly what we need. I agreed, even though my inner voice told me it was the beginning of a dangerous journey. But could I say no? After all, they really do live there. The next weekend turned into a marathon of house viewings. We toured 8 more properties. With each house, Webster and Perla's demands grew. What seemed like luxury yesterday was now just basic comfort. A house that was 20% more expensive than the original budget was now seen as minimally acceptable. What about the Highland neighborhood? Perla asked as we sat in a coffee shop after another day of viewings. There are some great houses for sale there, I sighed. Highland was the most expensive neighborhood in Tuscaloosa. Perla, I'd already stretched my budget to the limit. But you sold Atant stock last year, didn't you? She smiled. Webster said it was a good deal. I looked at my son in surprise. I didn't remember sharing such details of my finances with him. Yes, I did. And most of the money is already budgeted for the house. Well, maybe we can increase it a little. Perla spoke in a sweet voice, like she was asking for more dessert. For Daisy's sake. Highland has such great schools. I felt irritation boiling up inside me, but I held back. Instead, I decided to be brutally honest. Look, I looked at them both. I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart, but there are limits. I'm offering you a house that's several times better than where you live now. But I can't buy you a palace. Perla looked as if I had slapped her. Webster hastened to smooth things over. Mother, we understand, and we're very grateful. Don't we, Perla? She smiled strangely and nodded. Of course, Winnie. I'm sorry if I seemed ungrateful. The next day, Marla called me with the news. The house on Wisteria Lane had just come on the market. In her words, it was just adorable and perfect for the Webster family. Can I show it to you today? She asked. Houses like this don't stay on the market long. We met at the house 2 hours later. Me, Webster, Perla, and this time even Daisy, who had been picked up from school early for the occasion. The house on Wisteria Lane was really impressive, bigger than the one on Magnolia Drive, with more exquisite architecture and a better location. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office, a game room, a spacious kitchen that opened to the family room, and a backyard with a pool. That's him, Perla whispered as soon as we entered the high-ceilinged hallway. Webster nodded, his eyes glittering. He was already imagining how he would receive colleagues here, how he would park his car in the circular driveway. Daisy was delighted with the spacious second-floor room with the bay window. "Grandma, I could put my telescope in here," she exclaimed. "You should be able to see the stars perfectly from here." I smiled. Maybe it was all worth it to see such joy in my granddaughter's eyes. "How much?" Webster asked Marla when we finished looking around. She quoted a price that was 15% above my original budget. I felt my heart clench. It meant rethinking all my retirement plans. "Mom?" Webster turned to me. His eyes were a mixture of greed and pleading, like a child in front of a toy store window. I glanced at Daisy, who was still enthusiastically telling Perla how she'd set up her room. "Let's see what we can do," I said at last. That evening, I sat over my financial spreadsheets, calculating everything over and over again. If I sold some of the stock and moved some of the investments into more liquid assets, yes, I could afford it. But it meant a more modest life for me. No trips to the coast in winter. Saving on many small pleasures. Would it be worth it? I looked at Robert's picture. What would he say? Probably advise me to take care of myself. But then I pictured Daisy's face when she saw the new room. Spacious, bright, with room for all her books and projects. Yes, I decided. Worth it. The home buying process took a month. Marla was surprisingly meticulous, insisting on a full home inspection, checking all the paperwork, insurance history. I was grateful for her thoroughness, even though Webster kept rushing the process. "Mom, we're wasting time. The house could be taken over by other buyers." "Better to lose a house than buy a problem," I replied, repeating a phrase I'd told bank customers thousands of times. The inspection revealed a few minor problems: a leaky faucet, a faulty outlet, cracked tile on the porch. All of these were quickly fixed by the sellers. The main systems of the house, foundation, roof, electrical wiring, were rated good. "The house is in excellent condition for its age," the inspector, Mr. Patterson, an older man with eyes that seemed to have seen every crack in every Tuscaloosa home, assured me. "But I always recommend maximum insurance, especially for homes of this size and age." I nodded. Of course, we'll take out full insurance. That was a given. The day of signing the papers came on a clear April morning. We gathered in the notary's office. Me, Webster, Perla, and Marla. I signed paper after paper, transferring the rights to a house worth nearly $1 million to my son. "Wait," Webster said when we got to the insurance papers. "It's too expensive. Basic insurance is enough." "But Mr. Patterson recommended extended coverage," I countered. "It covers a lot more risks." "Mom," Webster lowered his voice, "it's an extra $5,000 a year. The house is in excellent condition, you heard yourself." "Yeah, but we're not throwing money away on insurance for problems that don't exist," he said. "Basic is enough." I looked at Marla. She shrugged slightly, indicating that it wasn't her decision. Perla avoided my gaze, staring at her flawless nails. "Okay," I conceded, signing the document for basic insurance. "But promise to think about expanding the coverage in the future." Of course, Mom. He patted my hand. But I could see he was already mentally elsewhere. In his new home, throwing a party for his coworkers. When all the papers were signed, Marla ceremoniously handed the keys to Webster. Congratulations on your new home! She smiled and turned to me. You've given a wonderful gift to your family, Mrs. Quimby. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. It was the most expensive gift I'd ever given, and part of me wondered if I was making a mistake. But when Webster hugged me, for the first time in years, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom," all doubt melted away. In that moment, I felt like I'd made the right choice. The move took 2 weeks. I helped as much as I could, packing fragile things, unpacking closets, making lists of what would go where in the new house. Perla was strangely aloof these days. She spent a lot of time in the new house planning furniture arrangements and picking out curtains, but had little involvement in packing up the old house. I can't wait until we finally move in, she said as Daisy and I put the books into boxes. I've already arranged for new furniture for the living room. The old one just won't look right in a house like this. But Mom, our furniture is still good, Daisy objected, and Grandmother has spent so much money on the house. Daisy, you're just a child and you don't understand, Perla said. A house like this has to have the right furnishings. Otherwise, what will the guests think? Daisy looked at me for support, but I just shrugged. It was their house now, and they had the right to furnish it as they wished. Finally, all the boxes were moved in, the furniture arranged, and it was housewarming day. Webster insisted on throwing a real party with a buffet, champagne, and lots of guests. Mom, this is a big event in our lives, he said. We have to make a big deal of it. I agreed, though I would have preferred a more modest family celebration. The guest list grew to 50 people, Webster's co-workers, Perla's friends, several of Daisy's teachers, and even some old acquaintances from the bank. Webster ordered catering from Tuscaloosa's finest restaurant, and Perla hired a florist to decorate the house. Don't worry about the expense, Mom, Webster said when I expressed concern about the cost of it all. Perla and I are paying for everything. This is our home, and we want to start our new life here right. The day of the housewarming party was warm and sunny, perfect weather for a party. I arrived early to help with the final preparations. The house looked amazing, with new furniture, fresh flowers in every room, and festive decorations. Daisy rushed towards me as soon as I walked in. Grandma, come on, I'll show you how I set up my room. Her room was just as she had dreamed of, with a telescope by the window, bookshelves along the walls, and a small desk for studying. She showed me her new 4-poster bed, a housewarming gift from her parents. It's so nice here, Grandma, and it's all thanks to you. She hugged me. I love you so much. I love you too, sweetheart, I whispered, feeling tears coming to my eyes. The guests started arriving around 3 in the afternoon. Webster greeted them with a big smile, showing them around the house with the pride of a new owner. Perla shone in her new dress, accepting compliments on her impeccable taste in interior decorating. I was introduced to each guest with the invariable phrase, "And this is my mother, Winifred. She gave us this house." This was followed by rapturous exclamations and comments about my extraordinary generosity. By 6 o'clock, the house was buzzing with conversation and laughter. People gathered in groups in the living room, in the kitchen, in the backyard by the pool. Waiters in white shirts were serving drinks and appetizers. I sat in the corner of the living room, watching with a strange sense of detachment. All these people were celebrating in the house I'd bought, but I felt almost like an outsider. Webster was too busy entertaining his boss to spend time with me. Perla flashed here and there, adjusting flowers and pillows, worrying about making everything look perfect. Only Daisy came up to me periodically, talking about her friends' reactions to the new house and asking if I needed anything. Around 7 o'clock, Webster rang the glass, attracting the attention of the guests. "Friends, I'd like to make a toast." He raised his champagne glass. To our new home, and to my incredibly generous mother, Winifred Quimby, without whom none of this would be possible. Everyone turned to me, raising their glasses. I smiled embarrassedly, feeling awkward in the center of attention. Thank you, Mom, Webster continued, looking at me. You've always supported us, and this house is the most amazing gift we've ever received. To Winifred! Someone exclaimed, and everyone echoed, to Winifred! After the toast, Lorraine, Boss Webster's wife, an elegant woman with a keen eye, came up to me. What an amazing gift you've given your son, she said, sitting down next to me. Not many parents can afford that. I've been lucky in life, I replied modestly, and I wanted to share it with my family. Do you live alone? She asked, looking me over with an appraising gaze. Yes, I have a small apartment not far from here. Have you thought about moving in with your son? There'd probably be room for you in a house that big. I shook my head. No, I value my independence. Besides, a young family needs its own space. A wise decision, she nodded. Although, of course, as you get older, it's harder to live alone. I wanted to say that I was still doing fine on my own at 75, but we were interrupted by Webster, who had come to take Lorraine to her husband. The party went on. Gradually, the guests began to disperse. By 10 o'clock, only Webster and Perla's closest friends remained, two couples with whom they often spent time. I felt tired and decided it was time to say goodbye. Webster, I walked over to my son, who was standing in the kitchen filling glasses. I think I should go home. It's been wonderful, but I'm tired. Are you leaving already? He looked at me with slight surprise. Stay a little longer. Brandon and Shelley had just started talking about their trip to Europe. No, honey, I really have to go. I kissed his cheek. Tell your friends I appreciate the company. Okay, he sighed. I'll walk you to the door. I said goodbye to Daisy, who was about to go to bed, to Perla, who barely nodded, busy talking to her friend, and to the rest of the guests. At the door, Webster gave me a hug. Thank you again, Mom, for everything. You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm glad you're happy in your new home. He helped me down the steps and walked me to my car. I was about to get behind the wheel when I remembered the pie I'd brought to the party. Oh, I forgot my baking mold in the kitchen. Wait, I'll pick it up real quick. No need, Mom. He tried to stop me. I'll bring it back tomorrow. No, it'll just take a minute. I need it for tomorrow's baking. I walked back to the house and quietly entered through the front door, not wanting to attract attention. There were voices coming from the kitchen, Webster, Perla, and their friends. I was almost to the kitchen door when I heard my name and instinctively stopped. Winnie almost cried when they thanked her, was Perla's voice, slightly distorted by alcohol. God, it was like she was giving holy alms. There was laughter. Hey, easy, it was Webster, but there was no real reproach in his voice. She gave us most of her savings after all. What else is she going to do with it? Perla snorted. It's not like she's going to a resort in Miami at her age. At least this way she'll see how they're spent in her lifetime. Laughter again. Weren't you afraid she'd want to live with you? A male voice I didn't recognize asked. My mother-in-law keeps hinting at it. Oh, Winnie's too proud for that, replied Perla. She'd rather die than admit she needs help. Besides, we've made it clear that's not an option. How so? A female voice asked curiously. You know, the usual excuses, Perla said with feigned weariness. We need our own space. Daisy needs her own room to study in, blah, blah, blah. In fact, the last thing we need is an old woman watching our every move in our own home. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. An old woman? Is that how they saw me? Can you believe she even tried to insist on some super expensive insurance? Webster continued. Like the house was gonna fall apart tomorrow. I could barely talk her out of it. That's smart, the man's voice said. Why throw money away? Exactly, Webster exclaimed. Now the money will be used for new patio furniture. Perla had already picked out a great set. I took a step back, not wanting to hear more. But my hand caught the vase on the console against the wall. The vase staggered and I barely caught it in time, but I made enough noise to interrupt the conversation in the kitchen. Who's there? Webster shouted. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, trying to maintain my dignity. Sorry, I forgot my baking dish, I said, pointing to the ceramic dish on the table. There was a heavy silence in the kitchen. Perla froze with the glass in her hand, her face pale. Webster looked like he'd been caught red-handed. The other two couples, Brandon and Shelley, Kyle and Lindsay, as I remembered now, were shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. Mom, Webster began, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't, I said calmly, though I was seething inside. I heard the whole thing. You misunderstood, Perla interjected quickly. We were just joking. Really? I looked her straight in the eye. It sounded very believable. I picked up my baking mold and turned to leave. Mom, wait. Webster grabbed my hand. Let's talk. About what, Webster? I turned to him. About how much you despise the old lady who bought you this house? Or about how smart you were to turn down the insurance I recommended? He let go of my hand, his face darkening. You were eavesdropping. No, I came to get my stuff and happened to hear the truth. Isn't that ironic? Perla set down her glass and walked over to us, her face suddenly hard. You know what, Winnie? Yes, we were telling the truth. You bought us this house, and we're grateful. But that doesn't give you the right to interfere in our lives or tell us how to live our lives. Perla, Webster began warningly, but she waved her away. No, let her know. We're tired of your constant advice and judgmental looks. You bought us a house? Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. But it's our house now, and we're gonna live in it the way we want. I stared at her, stunned not so much by the words as by the venom with which they were spoken. I've never tried to control your life, I said quietly. But you wanted to, Perla parried. Admit it, you hoped this gift would give you influence, that we would be eternally grateful and listen to your advice. Perla, that's enough, Webster interposed, but there was no real force in his voice. She turned to him. What? You said the same thing yourself just yesterday. How she's manipulating you through Daisy, how she's trying to tell us what to do with the house. Webster looked caught between two fires. He looked at me, then at Perla, and I saw the moment he made a choice. Mom, he sighed. Maybe we do need some space. We just moved in trying to get settled in. Maybe we shouldn't come over for a few weeks? I looked at my son, the man I'd raised alone, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, and I didn't recognize him. Did you? My voice was surprisingly calm. Then speak plainly, Webster. What do you want? He avoided my gaze. I think we need time to get used to a new home, a new life. Without me, I clarified. Temporarily, he looked up. Just a few weeks. Perla snorted. Come on, Webbs, tell her the truth. She turned to me, her eyes glittering with champagne and anger. Thanks for the house, Winnie. Really, thanks a lot. But now we don't need a burden like you anymore. Perla! Webster exclaimed, but did nothing to protect me. I stood there, holding my ceramic baking dish like a shield, and I felt something inside me break. Not my heart. It had already been broken many times in my long life. No, it was the last thread tying me to the illusion that my son, deep down, was still the boy I loved unconditionally. I see, I said at last. In that case, I won't bother you. I turned and walked toward the exit, feeling the stares of everyone in the room. I stopped at the door and added without turning around, I hope you will be happy in this house. I really do. I walked out into the night, closing the door quietly behind me. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. Not even Webster. As I got into my car, I put the baking mold on the passenger seat and looked at the house. Big, beautiful, glowing with warmth. The house I had bought for my family, giving away most of my savings. The house I had just been called a burden. I started the car and slowly pulled into the driveway. The tears I had held back in the kitchen were now flowing freely down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. There was no one to see my weakness. The drive to my apartment took 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I parked, grabbed my baking mold, and walked up to the second floor. My apartment greeted me with silence and darkness. I turned on the hallway light and saw my reflection in the mirror, an older woman with red eyes and an expression of deep pain on her face. A burden, I whispered, looking at my reflection. That's what I've become to my son. I walked to the living room and sank into a chair without removing my coat. I was still holding the baking mold, not knowing where to put it in this suddenly foreign apartment. All my life I had prided myself on my strength, my independence. I'd raised my son alone, built a career, provided myself with a decent old age. And now, at 75, I sat alone in an empty apartment, rejected by the only man I'd ever lived for. It was the longest night of my life. I didn't cry anymore. The tears dried up, leaving only emptiness behind. I sat in the chair until dawn, looking out the window and thinking about all the decisions that had brought me to this moment. When the first rays of sunlight penetrated the room, I finally got up, took off my coat and went to the bathroom. Looking at my tired face in the mirror, I swore to myself that this was the last time I would let my son hurt me. The morning after the housewarming party greeted me with a headache and a feeling like the world had been turned upside down. I barely slept, replaying the events of yesterday over and over in my head. Perla's words, Webster's acquiescence, the overwhelming realization that my family saw me only as a burden. I brewed myself some strong tea, the medicine my mother had taught me for all adversity, and sat by the window, watching Tuscaloosa wake up. People were rushing to work, neighborhood children were waiting for the school bus, and the mailman was starting his rounds. A normal day for everyone but me. The phone rang. I looked at the screen, Daisy. My hand froze over the receiver. What am I going to tell my granddaughter? How would I explain that her parents had kicked me out of their lives? The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. Grandma, it's me. Daisy's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I just wanted to tell you that I love you, and whatever happened yesterday, Mom and Dad won't tell me, but I know something happened. Just know that I will always love you. The tears I'd been holding back all morning came in floods. How was this girl? Only 16 years old, wiser and kinder than her parents. I didn't call back. I wasn't ready to explain the situation. Instead, I sent her a text. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. Don't worry about me, I'm fine. The next few days passed in a strange daze. I forced myself to follow my usual routine. Breakfast, a walk in the park, reading, dinner. But it all seemed mechanical, meaningless. I checked my phone every 15 minutes, hoping for a call from Webster apologizing. But there was no call. On the third day, I got a call from Evelyn, an old friend of mine. Winnie, what's going on? I've been calling you for 2 days. I sighed. Evelyn knew me too well to be fooled by the duty. Everything's fine. Webster and Perla, they kicked me out of their lives. What? After you bought them a house? I told her everything. The party, the overheard conversation, Perla's last words. That ungrateful bitch! Evelyn exclaimed. And Webster! How could he let her talk to you like that? He not only let her, I answered bitterly. He agreed with her. Winnie, darling, I'll be right there. No need, Evie, I can manage. Nonsense, I'll be there in 20 minutes with a bottle of wine and a chocolate cake. Evelyn was true to her word. Exactly 20 minutes later, she was standing at my door with bags from the grocery store. She hugged me without saying a word, and that hug was exactly what I needed. We sat on the balcony drinking wine at 3 in the afternoon. I hadn't done that since I was a student, and talked about life, about kids, about disappointments. You know, Evelyn said, pouring herself a second glass, maybe it's for the best. How could losing a son be for the best? I raised an eyebrow. You didn't lose your son, Winnie. You just saw his real face. Now you can stop wasting energy on people who don't appreciate you and start living for yourself. At 75? Why not? My father started learning Spanish at 80, and 3 years later he was fluent. Age is just a number. I shook my head, but there was some truth to what Evelyn said. All my life I'd put Webster's needs before my own. Maybe it was time to think about myself. The next day I decided to go out for a longer walk. The April sun was warming up, and I headed for Riverwalk Park, a small park on the banks of the Black Warrior, a 10-minute walk from my house. I was sitting on a bench watching the ducks on the river when I noticed an elderly man slowly approaching, leaning on a cane. Something about his gait seemed familiar. Mrs. Quimby? He stopped in front of my bench. Winifred Quimby? I looked at his face and recognized Orville Pym, the former lawyer who had once helped me with the paperwork after Robert's death. Mr. Pym, I smiled. What a surprise. Call me Orville, please. You and I are old enough for such formalities. He grinned. May I sit down? I moved over, making room. Orville sat down carefully, placing his cane beside me. I live not far from here, he said, pointing to the apartment complex across the street. Moved in after Margaret died. The house got too big for one old man. I nodded, remembering that his wife had died a few years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. It's been 5 years, he sighed. But thank you. How are you doing? How's Webster? I tensed up when I heard my son's name. He's fine. He just moved into a new house. That's great, Orville nodded. And you? You look, I'm sorry to be blunt, but you look upset. Something in his kind eyes and his genuine concern made me open up. To be honest, it wasn't the best time of my life. I hadn't intended to tell him the whole story. But the words came out. Orville listened intently, not interrupting, only nodding or frowning occasionally. It's unfortunate, he said when I had finished. But, unfortunately, not uncommon. I've seen many families destroyed over money and real estate. It's not about money, I countered. It's about respect. It's about basic human gratitude. You're right, he nodded. And that's the tragedy. Money can be regained, but respect, once lost, is rarely regained. We talked for almost 2 hours. Orville talked about his life after retirement, about his grandchildren who lived in other states and came twice a year, about the books he was reading, about his new hobby of growing orchids. You should come by and see my collection sometime, he said as we said goodbye. If you're interested, of course. I'd love to, I replied, surprised at myself. When was the last time I'd accepted an invitation from a man, especially after only a few hours of acquaintance? That's fine, he smiled. I'm often here in the mornings. Why don't we meet at the same time tomorrow? I said yes, and for the first time in days, I felt lighthearted. In the evening, Daisy called. This time I answered. Grandma, I'm so glad you picked up. How are you? I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you? I'm fine, she said quietly. Grandma, what happened at the party? My parents won't tell me, just that you two had a fight. I sighed. How to explain everything to a 16-year-old girl without denigrating her parents? Your parents and I, we have different views on some things. We need time to think things through. Is this about the house? I could hear the age-old insight in her voice. Partly, I admitted. But don't worry about it. It'll get better. I miss you, she said quietly. and I don't like what they did. Do you know what happened? I tensed up. Not everything. I heard them talking in the kitchen. Mom said something mean, and you left. Is that true? Yeah, something like that. I didn't want to go into details. But that's between me and your parents. You don't have to take sides. But I'm on your side, she exclaimed. You bought us this house, and they should be grateful. Daisy, listen to me, I said gravely. I don't want you to fight with your parents because of me. Promise me you won't. She reluctantly agreed, and we moved on to other topics. Her school projects, new friends in the neighborhood, plans for summer vacation. After the conversation, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Webster didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to contact me. It was as if I had ceased to exist for him the moment the door of their new home closed behind me. The next few days passed in relative peace. I met Orville in the park. We walked, talked about books, about politics, about life. He showed me his orchid collection, small but impressive. I took him out to dinner, and for the first time in years, I didn't cook just for myself. Evelyn noticed the change in my mood. You look better, she said when we met for lunch in town. You're even smiling. I'm starting to get used to the new reality, I replied. And maybe Orville is helping a little. Orville? She raised her eyebrows. Who's Orville? I told her about the new acquaintance, and Evelyn smiled. Winifred Quimby, you surprise me. Is there really a man in your life? Don't exaggerate. I felt myself blush. We're just friends. Of course, she winked. Just friends always starts that way. I shook my head, but I couldn't help but smile. At 75, am I blushing like a schoolgirl? On the 7th day after the housewarming party, I was involuntarily counting down the days like a disaster. The bell rang. I was preparing lunch and didn't look at the phone screen right away. I answered it automatically. Hello? Mom? Webster's voice was tense, almost panicked. Mom, you have to help. I froze with the knife in my hand. 7 days of silence and now this call? Webster? What's wrong? The house, Mom! There's a problem with the house! I slowly put the knife down, wiped my hands with a towel and sat down at the kitchen table. What kind of trouble? Here. He was breathing hard like he was running. The inspectors are here. They found some serious problems with the foundation, some cracks, shifting. I don't understand all that terminology, but they're saying the house is unsafe to live in. We're facing eviction, Mom. I was silent, digesting the information. The pre-purchase inspection showed no problems with the foundation. How is that possible? When did this happen? I finally asked. This morning. A neighbor noticed cracks in the driveway and called the inspectors. They inspected the foundation and found serious defects. They say that part of the house could collapse at any moment. What about the insurance? I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. That's just it. Webster's voice broke into a shout. Basic insurance doesn't cover foundation problems. If we'd gotten the extended coverage you suggested. He paused. As I advised, I repeated slowly. Yes, Mom. You were right. I was wrong. He sounded almost hysterical. But now is not the time to talk about it. We need help. The repairs will cost hundreds of thousands, and we don't have that kind of money. I closed my eyes. A part of me, a small gloating part that I wasn't proud of, felt satisfied. Justice had been served. But the other part, the mother I had been all my life, was rooting for her son, for her granddaughter. What do you want me to do, Webster? Help us, Mom, he begged. You're the only one who can. You have savings, investments, most of which I used to buy this house, I reminded him. I know, but there must be something left over. Or you could take out a loan against your apartment. Anything, Mom. We can't lose the house. I sat listening to my son's desperate pleas and thought about the last week, about how they kicked me out, of Perla's words. We don't need a burden like you anymore. and Webster's acquiescence. "Webster," I said at last, "I can't help you." "What?" He couldn't believe his ears. "What do you mean you can't? I spent almost all of my savings on the house. What's left I need to live on." "But Mom!" His voice was shaking. "We're going to lose the house. We'll be on the street." "Not on the street," I corrected him. "You still have the old house. You haven't sold it yet, have you?" "No, but, that's not it. We can't go back to that doghouse after the fancy mansion I gave you?" I finished for him. There was silence. I could hear Webster breathing heavily. "Mom," he began again quieter, "I know what we did was wrong. What Perla said. It was awful. I should have stopped her. I'm sorry. I really am." "You are?" I could feel the anger rising in me. "You're only sorry because you want my money, Webster. If the house was okay, you wouldn't have called me. Admit it." Silence again. Then, "Mom, please, for Daisy's sake, she loves this house so much, her new room." "Don't use my granddaughter." My voice turned icy. "It's beneath even you." What do you want me to do?" There was desperation in his voice. "I'll apologize. Perla and I will both apologize. We were wrong. Terribly wrong. You can move in with us if you want. We have plenty of room." I grinned bitterly. A week ago, I was a burden, and now they're inviting me to live with them. "Webster, listen to me carefully," I said calmly. "I won't give you any money. Not now, not later. I've already given you almost everything I had, and all I got in return was contempt. It won't happen again." "But Mom—" "I'm not finished," I interrupted him. "The problem with the house is your problem. You're a grown man. You can decide for yourself. Sell the house at a loss. Go back to the old house. Take out a loan. I don't care. But don't come to me for money." "You can't do that!" He was almost shouting. "You're my mother!" "Yes, I am your mother, and I've loved you all your life, Webster, but love doesn't mean letting you use me. It's over." "You're gonna regret this." His voice became menacing. "When we're on the street, when Daisy loses her home, you'll regret it." "Maybe," I agreed. "But not as much as I regretted giving my house to people who thought I was a burden." I pressed the end button and put the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking and my heart was racing. But in a strange way, I felt stronger than I had in years. The phone immediately rang again. "Webster." I rejected the call. It rang again and again. I turned off the sound and went back to making dinner. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. I went over and looked through the peephole. Webster was standing in the hallway, disheveled and agitated. I didn't answer it. "Mom!" He knocked again and again. "Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door." I sat down in the chair away from the door and waited. He kept knocking, calling me, even threatening to call the police. Finally, after almost 20 minutes, the knocking stopped. I went to the door and looked through the peephole again. The hallway was empty. Back in the living room, I saw that there was a message on my phone. From Orville. "How about a walk tonight? The weather promises to be lovely." I smiled and replied, "I'd love to. Meet me at the park at 6. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free of manipulation, free of guilt, free of the need to always be a good mother, even when my son wasn't a good son. Maybe Evelyn was right. Perhaps at 75, everything is just beginning. After Webster's call and his unsuccessful visit, I was at a loss for words. Despite my firm decision not to give in to manipulation, my motherly heart still ached. I paced around the apartment, running through every possible scenario in my mind. What if the house is really dangerous? What if Daisy gets hurt? How would I live with that? By the time I met Orville in the park that evening, my nerves were stretched to the limit. He noticed my condition at once. "Winifred, what's wrong?" he asked as we walked slowly down the alley along the river. "You look worried." I told him about Webster's call, about the trouble with the house, about my refusal to help. "I did the right thing," I said, more to convince myself than to convince him. But I still felt awful. Orville stroked his beard thoughtfully. You know, Winifred, in 40 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of family drama over real estate. And I can tell you one thing, if you agreed to help now, it would set a dangerous precedent. What do you mean? Your son would realize that no matter how he treats you, you'll always be there for him in a crisis. That's not help, Winifred, that's codependency. I nodded. Orville had voiced something I'd been thinking about but was afraid to admit. What about the granddaughter? I asked. Daisy is not guilty of anything, but she suffers because of adult decisions. Daisy is 16, right? She's old enough to understand the consequences of her parents' actions. And from what you've told me about her, she's a smart girl. I smiled, remembering how Daisy had always defended me, even when she was just a baby. Yes, she's special. Then trust her. Orville squeezed my hand lightly. She'll find a way to stay in touch with you, despite all the obstacles. His touch was unexpected, but pleasant. I felt the tension release a little. You know, Orville continued, when my daughter Eleanor divorced, her ex-husband tried to turn her grandchildren against her. He used the same techniques, manipulation, guilt. But children see more than we realize. Over time, they figure out who really loves them unselfishly. I hope you're right, I sighed. I just don't want to lose Daisy. You won't, Orville said confidently. True love always finds a way. We reached a small area overlooking the river and sat down on a bench. The sun was slowly sinking to the horizon, coloring the water golden. It's beautiful, I whispered. Yes, it is, Orville agreed, but he wasn't looking at the river. He was looking at me. I felt myself blushing and looked away. At 75, who would have thought it? The next morning, I was awakened by the ringing of the phone. I reluctantly reached for the bedside table, expecting to see Webster's name on the screen. But it was Daisy. Grandma? Her voice sounded muffled, like she was speaking from under the covers. Are you awake? No, sweetie, I lied, sitting up in bed. What happened? My parents were fighting all night. Dad said you refused to help with the house, and Mom called you She stammered. Anyway, she said a lot of mean things. And then Daddy started blaming her for being mean to you at the housewarming party. I closed my eyes. All I needed was for Daisy to be at the center of a family conflict. I'm sorry you have to hear that, I said. Adults sometimes say terrible things in anger. It's not just that, Daisy continued. We had some people over yesterday to look at the house. One of them said it was dangerous to be here. Mom was crying and Dad was yelling into the phone at someone. Were you asked to move out? I asked, feeling my heart clench. Not yet. But Dad said if the renovations don't start soon, we'll have to. She was quiet. Grandma, why don't you want to help? I took a deep breath. How do you explain the complexities of adult relationships to a teenager? Daisy, it's not that easy. I've already spent most of my savings buying this house. What's left I need to live on? But you have an apartment, she argued. You could sell it and move in with us. Dad said he'd offered you that. I grinned bitterly. Of course, Webster had presented it in a favorable light. Daisy, something happened between me and your parents at the housewarming party. Something that makes it impossible for me to live with you. What was it? She insisted. Mom said something rude, I know. But can't you just forgive and forget? Sometimes words hurt too deeply, I said quietly. And it's not just words, it's actions, attitudes. Your parents made it clear they didn't want me in their lives until they needed the money. Daisy was silent for a few seconds. But I do want you in my life, she said finally. It's not fair that I can't see you because of their fight. You can always call me, I assured her. And when you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. But that's 2 more years, she exclaimed. I can't wait that long. There was so much despair in her voice that my heart sank. Look, I said, making a decision. Maybe we could see each other sometimes. After school or on the weekends. Just don't tell your parents if they mind. Really? She sounded a little happier. Would you be okay with that? Of course I would. You're my granddaughter and nothing will change that. I love you, Grandma, she said. And I'm ashamed of my parents. You don't have to be ashamed of them, I said. Just be yourself, Daisy. That's all I ask. After talking to my granddaughter, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, thinking about the situation. Am I doing the right thing by encouraging Daisy to date me in secret from her parents? Am I ruining her relationship with Webster and Perla? But is it fair to deprive a child of her grandmother's company because of adult conflict? The doorbell rang, interrupting my musings. Perla stood on the doorstep, impeccably dressed and wearing makeup as always. Only the dark circles under her eyes showed her fatigue. Winnie, she said with a strained smile. Can I come in? I stepped back silently, letting her into the apartment. Perla walked into the living room and paused, looking around as if she'd never been here before, even though she'd been here dozens of times. Sit down, I said. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. She sat on the edge of the couch, her back unnaturally straight. I came to talk about the house. I thought so. I nodded, sitting down in the chair across from her. Webster told me about the problems with the foundation. Yes, the situation is complicated. She ran a hand through her hair, a nervous gesture I'd never noticed before. The engineers say the house is built on unstable ground. There's some underground water, erosion. Anyway, the foundation's cracking. It's gonna need major repairs. And the insurance doesn't cover it, I said. No, she shook her head. Basic insurance only covered fire, flood, and other external damage. You needed extended coverage for the foundation. Just like I'd advised. Perla pressed her lips together. Yes, you were right. We should have listened, but that's not what this is about. We need help, Winnie. I already told Webster I can't help, I said calmly. I just don't have that kind of money. But you have this apartment, she countered. You could take out a loan against it or sell it and live with us. Webster agrees. We'll set up a guest room just for you. I gave her a long look. Perla, a week ago, you called me a burden and said you didn't need me anymore. And now you want me to move in with you? She lowered her eyes. I was wrong. I said some terrible things in the heat of, I don't know what. Pride, maybe. Or greed. But I'm sorry, really. Sorry because you want my money, I said. Not because you're really sorry. It's not fair. She raised her head, tears glistening in her eyes. Yes, we need the money. But that doesn't mean I don't regret what I said. I was awful to you, Winnie. And I'm ashamed. I sighed. Perla had always been a good actress. How many times had she charmed customers at the furniture store, getting them to buy things they couldn't afford? Even if I believed you, Perla, it wouldn't change anything. I can't help you with the renovations. My finances are limited. But you can sell the apartment. She raised her voice again, then pulled herself together. I'm sorry, I just don't understand why you don't want to help your only son. Because I already have, I said firmly. I bought you a house you didn't bother to properly insure despite my advice. Perla stood up, her face red with anger. You're just getting back at us. You're using this situation to punish us for what we said. I stood up too. No, Perla, I'm just not letting myself be used anymore. And if you call that revenge, that's your right. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. You're gonna regret this, Vinny. When we lose the house, when Daisy's homeless, you'll regret it. You still have the old house, I reminded her. No one's going to be left on the street. You know very well we can't go back there, she exclaimed. Not after living here. It's your choice, I shrugged. Like so many other decisions you've made. She looked at me with such hatred that for a moment I was afraid. "You don't know what we're capable of yet," she hissed and walked out, slamming the door. I sank into the chair, feeling my hands shaking. Perla's threat sounded ominous. What did she mean? What could they do? That evening I told Orville about my sister-in-law's visit. We sat in his apartment, cozy and filled with books. The orchids on the windowsills bloomed in all shades of pink and purple. "Did she threaten you?" He frowned when I recounted Perla's last words. "Not directly," I shook my head, "but it sounded scary. Would you like me to talk to them?" he offered. "As a lawyer, I could explain that any attempts to pressure you could have consequences." "Thank you, but no," I smiled. "It would only make things more difficult. I can handle it." He covered my hand with his. "I know you will. You're a strong woman, Winifred, stronger than you think." There was so much warmth and admiration in his eyes that I felt 20 years younger. "You know," he said after a little silence, "when Margaret died, I thought my life was over. 43 years together, and suddenly I was alone. I didn't know how to go on, why I woke up in the morning." I nodded, understanding his feelings. When Robert left, I felt the same way. "But then I realized," he continued, "that life goes on, even when it seems impossible. And it can be filled with new meanings, new relationships." He squeezed my hand lightly, and I didn't pull away. The next day I got a call from Webster. His voice sounded tired and defeated. "Mom, I'm calling to say we're moving out of the house. The engineers say it's dangerous to stay, especially if it rains." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied sincerely. "Where are you moving?" "Where?" "Back to the old house," he sighed. "We don't have a choice. The realtor says the house can be sold for demolition, but we'll only get a fraction of its value." "I understand," I said, not knowing what else to say. "Perla said she came to see you," he continued after a pause, "and that you refused to help." "Yes," I confirmed, "but not because I don't want to, Webster. It's because I can't." "You could have sold the apartment," he said, the accusatory tone back in his voice, "if you really wanted to help." "And where would I live?" I asked. "With us, of course. There's room in the old house." I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "No, Webster. After all that's been said, it's impossible." "So you won't forgive us?" He sounded resentful now. "Will you hold a grudge for the rest of your life?" "It's not about resentment," I tried to say calmly. "It's about respect, trust, reciprocity. It's all broken, and not by me." "But we're a family," he insisted. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It does," I replied. "That's why I'm so hurt by your betrayal." He exhaled noisily. "Okay, Mom, I get it. You don't want to help, but don't at least forbid Daisy from seeing you. She misses you." "I've never forbidden her," I objected. "On the contrary, you could have forbidden her to see me." "We're not the monsters you think we are," he said tiredly. "Daisy loves you, and we will not interfere with your communication." "Thank you," I said, surprised at his sudden concession. "You're welcome," he said quietly. "Mom, no matter what, I still love you, and I hope that someday you'll be able to forgive us." After talking to my son, I felt emotionally drained. His last words of love, were they sincere or just another manipulation? And did it really matter? I decided to take a walk to clear my head. May was in full swing, and Tuscaloosa was awash in flowers. Azaleas, magnolias, jasmine, the air was filled with their scents. In the park, I met Orville, who seemed to be waiting for me. "I was hoping to see you here," he smiled. "Are you all right?" I told him about the conversation with Webster, his sudden humility, his declaration of love. "Do you think he was sincere?" Orville asked. "I don't know." I shook my head. Part of me wants to believe that he is. That somewhere deep down inside, he's still the boy I raised. But the other part suspects this is just another tactic. Yes, I admit it. Especially his sudden acceptance of my seeing Daisy. He'd been adamantly against it before. Orville thought for a moment. Perhaps he had really realized his mistake. Losing the house was a serious blow that might have made him reevaluate his priorities. Or, I added, he simply realized that threats and accusations weren't working and decided to try a different approach. Either way, Orville said, be careful. Don't make hasty decisions under the influence of emotion. I won't, I promised. I'd had enough of rash behavior. The next day, Daisy called and asked if she could come over after school. Dad said it was okay, she added. Can you believe that? Yeah, it's unexpected, I said. Sure, come over. I'll bake your favorite blueberry muffins. Daisy arrived at 3 o'clock with her backpack on her back and a brightly colored scarf around her neck. I noticed she looked worried. What's wrong, Sunshine? I asked as we sat down in the kitchen with tea and muffins. We're moving back to the old house, she said. The workers are already packing. I know, your father told me. Is it temporary? I don't think so. She shook her head. Dad says the house will have to be sold for demolition and we don't have the money to renovate it. I'm sorry, Daisy. I covered her hand with mine. I know how much you loved your new room. Yes, it was wonderful, Daisy sighed. But it's not just that. My parents fight all the time. Mom blames Dad for not listening to you about the insurance, and Dad says she ruined it with her rude words at the housewarming party. Don't take it personally, I advised. Adults often find fault when things go wrong. But what if they get divorced? There were tears in her eyes. Mommy said yesterday that she couldn't live like that anymore. I put my arm around my granddaughter, feeling her shaking. Daisy, listen to me. Whatever happened between your parents, it's not your fault, and they'll both always love you, whether they're together or not. I know, she blew her nose. It's just that everything was so good in the new house, and now it's going to be different, I finished for her. But it doesn't have to be worse. Sometimes change opens up new possibilities. She nodded, but I could see that my words weren't very comforting. Grandma, she said after a pause, can't you really help with the house repairs? I sighed. Of course, Webster and Perla had talked to her about it. I can't, Sunshine. I spent almost all of my savings to buy the house. What's left I need to live on. What about your apartment? She looked at me. Dad said you could sell it and move in with us. And live with people who called me a burden? I shook my head. Daisy, there are lines you can't cross. Your parents crossed them. She lowered her eyes. I understand. It's just, I wish things could go back to the way they were. Me too, I admitted. But sometimes we have to accept reality as it is, not as we'd like it to be. We talked for another 2 hours. Daisy talked about school, about her projects, about her new friends. I listened, happy that despite all the problems, my granddaughter remained cheerful and inquisitive. When it was time to leave, she gave me a big hug. I love you, Grandma, and I'll keep coming even if we move back to the old house. I love you too, sweetheart, I said, kissing her forehead. And I'll always be happy to see you. After Daisy left, I sat at the window for a long time, thinking about our conversation. The trouble with the house was clearly affecting Webster and Perla's relationship. Part of me felt grimly satisfied that justice had been done, but another part was worried about Daisy, who was caught between two fires. That evening, I called Orville and told him about my granddaughter's visit. They're using the child to pressure you, he said indignantly. That's low. I'm not sure they were setting her up on purpose, I countered. Daisy's a smart girl. She asks her own questions. Maybe, he agreed. But it's strange that your son suddenly lets her see you, and then she starts talking about selling the apartment. I wondered. Orville was right. The coincidence seemed suspicious. What should I do? I asked. I don't want to push Daisy away, but I also don't want her to be used as a pawn in this game. Keep talking to her, Orville advised. But be careful what you say. And remember, your decision not to help with the repairs is the right one. Don't let them manipulate you through your granddaughter. I nodded, grateful for his encouragement. It had been a month since Webster and his family had returned to the old house. May had changed to June, bringing with it the hot humidity that characterized Alabama summers. I sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping iced tea and reflecting on how my life had changed over the weeks. Daisy came to see me twice a week, Tuesdays after school and Saturday mornings. We baked muffins, read books, sometimes just talked about everything in the world. She would tell me about the situation at home. The tension between the parents hadn't disappeared, but it was less obvious. They were adjusting to life in the old house, which now seemed cramped and uncomfortable after the spacious mansion on Wisteria Lane. "Mommy's still mad at Daddy about the insurance," Daisy said during one of their visits. "And Daddy's mad at Mommy because she insulted you. But they don't yell at each other anymore. They just..." Silent. I nodded, realizing that this lull might be temporary. The deep cracks in a relationship don't disappear on their own. Webster had only called me once this month to let me know they'd found a buyer for the house, a construction company that planned to tear it down and build 2 new houses on the lot. "We'll get less than half of what the house was worth," he said bitterly, "but there is no choice. The bank is demanding that we pay off the mortgage." "I'm sorry about that," I replied sincerely. "You are?" There was doubt in his voice. "Sometimes I think you're glad we're unhappy." "Webster," I sighed, "I'm your mother. How can I be happy about your problems? Just because I can't help financially doesn't mean I don't care." "I'm sorry," he paused. "I'm just, angry at the world right now, especially at myself. If I'd listened to you about the insurance..." "What's done is done," I said. "Now we have to move on." "Yes," he agreed. Perla suggested selling the old house and buying a newer one in a different neighborhood. A fresh start. "I think that's a good idea," I agreed, surprised at my son's sudden candor. Sometimes a change of place helps to turn the page. "Maybe." He was silent again. "Mom, can you ever forgive us?" "Me?" I closed my eyes, feeling a lump come up in my throat. How many times had I imagined this conversation, rehearsed the answers? "I've already forgiven you, Webster," I said finally. "But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back to the way things were. Some words and actions can't be undone." "I understand." His voice grew quieter. "I was just thinking, maybe someday." "Let's just focus on the present," I suggested. "On keeping Daisy alive, on getting you back on your feet." "You're right," he agreed. As always, after that conversation, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to sort out my feelings. Had I really forgiven my son, or had I just said what I felt I had to say? And what was our relationship now, after everything that had happened? Orville had become an important part of my life. We saw each other almost every day, walking in the park, going to the movies, having dinner together. He was an attentive listener, a wise counselor, and, to my surprise, a caring companion. Our relationship developed slowly, with the caution typical of people of our age, who have already known both the joy of love and the bitterness of loss. "You look happier," said Evelyn, when we met in the cafe. "This Orville thing has done you good." I smiled, feeling the color rise to my cheeks. "He's a good man. Kind, smart, with a sense of humor. And he's clearly in love with you." She winked. "I saw the way he looked at you when you walked by the library last Thursday." "Don't exaggerate." I shook my head, but I felt a pleasant warmth in my soul. "We're just enjoying each other's company." "Of course we are," Evelyn grinned. "Anyway, I'm happy for you, Winnie. After everything that happened with Webster and that unfortunate house, you deserve a little happiness." That same night, Orville took me to dinner at the River, one of Tuscaloosa's finest restaurants. He was unusually nervous, rubbing his napkin and dropping his fork several times. "Is everything okay?" I asked when dessert was served. "Yeah, sure," he coughed. "It's just, I have something for you." He pulled a small box out of his pocket and my heart skipped a beat. "Really?" "Don't worry," he grinned, noticing my expression. "It's not what you think it is. Not yet, anyway." He opened the box. Inside was a dainty silver pendant in the shape of an orchid. "I saw it in an antique store and immediately thought of you," he said. "Dainty, unique, beautiful even in your old age." I laughed. "I'm not sure about the old age compliment, but the pendant is really beautiful." "May I?" He stood up and walked over to me. I nodded, and he carefully fastened the chain around my neck. His fingers lightly touched my skin, sending a sudden wave of goosebumps. "Winifred," he said, returning to his seat, "these past weeks have been the happiest I've had in years. And I've been thinking, maybe we should take the next step." "Which one?" I tensed. "Nothing drastic," he smiled. "It's just, I got an offer from my nephew to spend the summer at his beach house in Florida, Pensacola Beach, right by the water. And I thought you could come with me." I blinked, surprised by the offer. "For the whole summer?" "Yes, from July through September. Of course, we could come here whenever you wanted to see Daisy, but spend most of our time out there by the ocean. What do you say?" The thought of 3 months on the coast, away from Tuscaloosa and all its associated problems, was tempting. I imagined morning walks on the beach, sunsets over the Gulf of Mexico, leisurely conversations with Orville on the veranda. "It's very tempting," I admitted. "But I need to think about it. It's a big step." "Of course," he nodded understandingly. "No pressure, just know that the offer is open." At home, I pondered Orville's proposal for a long time. Why had I hesitated? What was holding me back? Daisy? But we could come over to see her. The apartment? I could rent it out for the summer. Fear of change? Maybe. The next day I met with Daisy, as I usually do on Tuesdays. She noticed the pendant right away. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed. "Is it from Orville?" I nodded, surprised by her insight. "How do you know?" "Grandmother." She rolled her eyes. "I can see how you change when you talk about him, and how your eyes light up when you come back from your meetings. I'm not a child." I smiled, touched by her observation. "Yes, it's from him, and I have news. He invited me to spend the summer on the Florida coast." "Wow!" Her eyes widened. "That's great. Did you say yes?" "Not yet," I sighed. "I'm worried about you. We won't be able to see each other as often." "Grandma," she looked at me seriously, "you don't have to give up happiness because of me. We can video chat every day, and you'll come over once in a while, right?" "Of course," I nodded. "But still—" "No buts," she shook her head firmly. "You deserve this vacation, after everything that's happened." I hugged her, tears welling up in my eyes. "When did you get to be so wise?" "I have a good grandmother," she winked. "I learned a lot from her." That evening I called Orville and told him that I accepted his offer. His joy was almost palpable, even through the phone. "You won't regret it, Winifred," he promised. "It's going to be a wonderful summer." The next 2 weeks passed in preparation. I met with a realtor to discuss a short-term lease on my apartment, sorted through my belongings, decided what to take with me and what to leave behind. Evelyn helped me with my summer closet choices, insisting I needed new swimsuits and beach dresses. At 75? I looked skeptically at the bright sundress she was suggesting. "Exactly," she nodded. "It's a good time to wear what you want to wear, not what's appropriate." Daisy was thrilled with my plans. She even helped me make a list of places to visit in Florida. "Be sure to go to the Gulfaria Marine Aquarium," she advised, "and the National Naval Aviation Museum. And of course, Navarre Beach. It has the whitest sand in the world. I promised to visit all the recommended places and bring her souvenirs. A week before I left, I received an unexpected message from Webster. He asked if I could stop by to talk. I agreed, though I was tense inside. What did he want this time? Webster came in the evening looking tired but calmer than the last time I'd seen him. "Thanks for agreeing to see me, Mom," he said, sitting down in a chair in the living room. "Daisy told me you were going away for the summer." "Yes," I confirmed. "To Florida with a friend." "Orville Pym?" He raised an eyebrow. "Daisy talks about him a lot." I nodded, preparing myself for disapproval or ridicule. But Webster surprised me. "I'm happy for you, Mom," he said sincerely. "You deserve to be happy." "Thank you." I was surprised by his reaction. "I didn't expect that I would support you?" He grinned bitterly. "After everything I've done, it's not surprising." He was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I've come to apologize, Mother. For real, not to get something in return. The way Perla and I treated you, it's unforgivable, especially after your generosity." I watched him carefully, trying to see the sincerity in his eyes. To my surprise, it was there. "What's changed, Webster?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "A lot of things. Losing the house, of course. But most importantly, I finally saw the man I'd become. What a son. And I'm, ashamed." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that hadn't changed since he was a teenager. "When you refused to help with the repairs, I was furious. I thought you were cruel, vindictive. But then, over time, I began to understand. You just set boundaries that I never respected." I remained silent, amazed at his insight. "Perla and I, we're going through a rough patch," he continued. "We're trying to save the marriage, going to counseling. And one of the things we're talking about is our relationship to you, to your money. How we saw you as a source of financial support, not as a person with your own needs and feelings." "I appreciate your honesty," I finally said. "And I'm glad you're working through your issues." "I'm not asking to repair the relationship." He held up his hand. "I realize that some bridges have been burned. But I wanted you to know that I realized my mistakes, and I'm going to work on myself to be a better person. For Daisy, for myself. Maybe someday, if you want to. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." I smiled softly. "Time will tell." He nodded and stood up. "One more thing. We sold both the house on Wisteria Lane and the old one. We bought a new one, smaller, but in a good neighborhood, not far from Daisy's school." "I'm glad," she said sincerely. "A new beginning can be helpful." "Yes," he said quietly. "Well, I won't take up any more of your time. Have a nice vacation in Florida." He headed for the door but stopped. "Mom, I want you to know that whether you ever forgive me or not, I will always love you. And I will always be grateful for everything you've done for me." After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, digesting what I had heard. His words sounded sincere, and part of me wanted to believe in his remorse. But the other part, the more cautious part, reminded me of how many times in the past he'd said the right things without backing them up with actions. That evening, I discussed Webster's visit with Orville. We sat on his balcony watching the sunset. "Do you think he's sincere?" Orville asked after listening to my story. "Perhaps," I shook my head. "He seemed genuinely remorseful. But I don't know if I can trust my feelings when it comes to Webster anymore." "Trust but verify," Orville smiled. "Give him a chance to prove his sincerity with deeds, not words." "Yes," I agreed. "Time will tell. And remember," he took my hand, "whatever happens to your relationship with your son doesn't define you or your happiness. You have a life, Winifred, and it's just beginning." I squeezed his hand, feeling deeply grateful for his presence in my life. On the day of my departure, Daisy, Evelyn, and to my surprise, Webster came to the station to see me off. He stood a little apart, awkwardly shuffling from foot to foot, but the very fact of his presence was significant. "I'll miss you, Grandma." Daisy hugged me tightly. "Promise to send a picture every day." "I promise," I smiled. "And don't forget, we agreed to have video calls on Sundays." "Of course," she nodded. "And I'll come to see you in August like we planned." Evelyn hugged me, whispering in my ear, "Enjoy every moment, Winnie. And don't worry about a thing, I'll keep an eye on your apartment." When I approached Webster, he hesitantly held out his hand, but I gave him a quick but firm hug. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Thanks for letting me," he replied. "Have a good rest, Mom." Orville was waiting for me by the wagon, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "For you," he said, holding out the bouquet. "The beginning of our adventure." I took the flowers, feeling my heart fill with warmth. Could it be that at 75, everything was really just beginning? The train touched down, taking us south to the Florida coast, to new experiences and opportunities. I looked out the window at the departing platform, where Daisy waved, Evelyn smiled, and Webster stood with a pensive expression. A summer by the ocean was ahead, new places, new acquaintances, and a man who saw me not as a source of financial support, not as a burden, but as an equal, a woman worthy of respect and love. I didn't know what the future would bring. Whether Webster and I would ever repair our relationship, whether Orville would become more than just a friend, how Daisy's life would turn out when she came of age. But I knew one thing. I would no longer live by other people's expectations. I would not sacrifice my well-being for those who didn't appreciate those sacrifices. I would not allow myself to be manipulated out of guilt or obligation. At 75, I finally learned to put myself first, and that was the most important gift I'd ever given myself. I turned to Orville, who was dozing off in the chair across the hall. The sunlight played in his gray hair, making it almost silver. On his face was the calm smile of a man who has made peace with his past and looks forward to the future. It was the same smile I knew that lit up my face.